self-sufficient. Okay. Now once again, focus on your sense of I. In particular, remember those times when it seems the I is a controller of your mind and your body. As if your I were like the king, and mind and body, including the different body parts, the different types of mind, being like its subject. Or the I being like a puppet master, and mind and body like the puppet. Are there times when the I, in relation to your mind and body, appears in that way? When it does, then that type of I, the way it appears to you, is described as a self-sufficient I. Feels as if it is the I that makes me meditate. The I that controls the meditating mind. And that it starts the meditation, it ends the meditation, and it is responsible for the mind to go back to the object when it's distracted. Doesn't it even seem that it is the I that controls my back in the way that it keeps it straight while meditating? So it seems to us as if it was like the master in charge of our mind and body. So sometimes it may seem that this master, this I, this self-sufficient I, exists totally separate from mind and body. Independent of them, yet still controlling them. While at other times, it seems that it despite existing separate from mind and body as its master, it's connected to them. When we have a sense that mind and body exist separate from that master, from that controlling I, we may even go as far as thinking it's possible to swap, to exchange our mind and body with that of another person. Or we at least wish for that and even imagine that it was possible. But not only do we have a sense sometimes that there is a type of controller of mind and body, responsible for our mental and physical actions. It also seems that this self-sufficient I exists substantially, which means it seems that I could identify that self, that I, without having to rely on identifying mind or body. Just as I can describe a king without having to talk about his subjects, I can think of a king totally separate from the people of his kingdom. That are controlled by him. such a self is impossible. It cannot possibly exist. For the more we looked for it, the clearer it should become. While the opposite is the case. When we pay attention to it, look for it, we can't find it. How could there be a self-sufficient I that exists totally independently of mind and body? For then it would no longer make sense to say, I've grown taller, I put on weight, or I'm meditating. Because it would be like saying the king became taller when one of his subjects grew a few centimeters. Or to say the king meditates when his sons do so. But even if that self-sufficient self or I were not to exist separately, yet still be in control of mind and body, where and how could it exist? And how in the world could we identify that I without identifying the mind or the body. For in actuality, whenever we speak of the self, whenever we describe it, we actually describe a mental or physical characteristic. For whenever we identify the self as it appears to us, we actually talk about or identify a mental or physical characteristic. So therefore, it doesn't make any sense that such a self-sufficient, substantially existent I could ever exist. For logically, its existence doesn't make sense. And we cannot find it the moment we pay attention to it. Therefore, it's our mind that makes us start the meditation and end the meditation. And it's the mind that is observing the meditating mind through introspection. And the mind that is responsible for us to keep our back straight. It is not a separate self. Because if it was, then even if we fainted, that self would still exist. But obviously when we faint, we no longer keep a straight back, and we no longer meditate. While the self is there, still there. So now to conclude, spend a few moments focusing on whatever emotion you can make arise, an emotion that feels that the self, the way it appears to us as an owner of mind and body, is just impossible. And when it appears to exist that way, that's simply a mistaken appearance. Similar to an optical illusion. So spend a few moments just focusing on that. The non-findability of such a self. Was it difficult? And again, as I said before, that sense we have of an I, it's not always there. But there are times it feels like the I is the controller. And the last part I said, maybe that wasn't clear, but what I meant was, if that self really existed, it's there all the time. It should be there all the time. So we of course say the person is there when they're asleep. So it should even be able to control mind and body when we're asleep. But when we're faint, because the self is still there. So what happens when we faint? Suddenly we fall over. So it's obvious that it's the coarse mind that is not active right now, and that is the coarse mind that keeps our back straight. And when we faint, then it's a subtler mind. But we don't talk about a coarse self and a subtle self. There's one self, a single self. So that would no longer make sense. When we faint, we lose all control, but the self is still there. Now, just doing this meditation on a particular way in which the I appears, whether based on our intellectually acquired sense, it is this owner or like a king and his subjects totally separate from the subjects, or an owner, a controller like a king who is inseparably linked. Either way, doesn't make sense. And if in both cases, just as we can recognize a king, talk about a king without having to talk about his subjects, it seems that is true for the I. This is such a strong concept to do something to go and find yourself in the West. And you've said that this also exists in India. So it's so interesting. We should be able, the longer we do whatever we do to find ourselves, the clearer it should become. But I've never met anyone who would say, I found myself, this is what it is. Right? And then describing whatever they found without describing mind or body. Because of course the I is just labeled on the basis of mind and body. But having done this kind of meditation that is, you would probably categorize it as part of the wisdom aspect, now we want to take it more towards what are the emotions that are created, extreme emotions, harmful emotions, that are created because of our belief in such a self. Well, I'd say, most importantly, a sense, just as we would try at all times to defend a king, right? I mean, as traditionally, save the king, you know, or like the bees when the queen, right? They protect their queen. So in the same way, you know, like think of your mind and body like these bees protecting, we always try to protect the I. So as if there was something separate we had to protect. We have to defend against physical harm, against any kind of insult, against anything we would deem harmful. Now, here there's a fine line. Of course, we should do everything that we stay alive and healthy. So on a physical level, this is one part, but even just the sense that if someone touches us, who we think is disgusting, right? Touching us is not going to kill us. But the sense of someone we think are disgusting, and even if their hands are clean, if they do this, we go, ugh, how could they touch me? As if there was a self that was now somehow contaminated, right? Or how dare they encroach on my personal space, right? We feel like someone comes too close to us. They don't respect our personal space. Does that exist in India? That kind of sense of personal space? Sometimes in the train it doesn't seem like it, because like, but I guess if the person came too close up to your face in particular, it'd be like, ugh, come on, keep some distance. So despite that proximity, sometimes when you travel, even your legs touching, but that's just this part, but it's not right in your face. And we notice sometimes when someone is angry with another person, they come really close, as in like, I don't care about your personal space. You go really close to them because you know it bothers them and that's why you do it. But just the mere fact that it bothers that, and I'm not talking about them smelling from their mouth as they're shouting at you, that's not why, even if they didn't. So just that sense, whoa, they're so close. They're too close to me. What is that feeling? Like they're encroaching on my personal space. That feeling like the I is somehow harmed, although nothing happens in that moment. Very interesting sense. The I, it's not the mind, it's not the body, it's the I that feels encroached upon. It feels threatened. It feels, right? So again, it's the sense of something separate, a separate being there. Or when someone looks at us in a funny way, in actuality, they just look at my arm maybe in a funny way. And it's not like my arm feels hurt. It feels the I is hurt. By way of looking at my arm in a funny way, I personally feel insulted. Or someone broke into my house. They're long gone. They won't get back into my house. I have a new alarm system, they won't get in. And still I feel violated. Have you ever had that feeling? Like, oh, someone has come into my house. If you've ever had, once I went to the Kala Chakra when I was still near Tushita, I had a little house, my meditation house. I went to the Kala Chakra and someone broke into my house. And there was not much to steal, and what they stole I didn't care, but it was more about the fact that someone was in my personal space where I sleep. Nothing happened. And the people who found that someone broke into my house actually cleaned up. Apparently the person was intoxicated, so there was some alcohol lying around, a bottle or something. So they cleaned everything up. There was no smell, there was nothing of that sort. And still I felt violated. Someone came into my space that is just mine without the permission and in a violent way. I was personally, it wasn't my body, it wasn't my mind, it was mainly myself that felt violated. Does that make sense? Yeah, it was weird. And I remember once taking a train to Drepung with my classmates, and there were lots of soldiers in our compartment. Pathankot, there are army bases, so we used to travel from Pathankot to Delhi and then further on to Hubli in South India. And as it happened, sometimes we got only tickets with lots of soldiers in the same train compartment. And so I felt safe throughout the nights because my classmates were all around me. But I remember leaving the train and there was this kind of soldier standing at the entrance. And as I was waiting to depart the train, he touched me in such an inappropriate way. It was so disgusting. I don't even want to point the direction where it was, but never mind. He touched me. And I was so embarrassed, and I actually wanted to hit him. But it's a little difficult to hit people. So I couldn't fit him in the face. So I just went like that in his belly. Beep, beep. And everyone laughed. You know, you're like, why did you do that? Beep, beep. He had like a pot belly, so. And everyone thought it was funny, and I'm glad I didn't hit him. You know, I saw it in the movies, but you can't just easily hit someone. And I departed and I was so embarrassed. Ugh, how could I make this happen? How could I allow this? Actually, what was it? Nothing. I mean, if he had touched my elbow, it wouldn't have been that bad, you know? It was just like what I associated with being touched in that place. And I felt violated and humiliated. And if I think about it, there was no I. There was a specific body part, so what? It's really quick, you know, done and over. And it was not my problem, it was his problem. So why did I feel embarrassed? It's all culturally, it has all to do with the culture I was raised in. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was dressed as a nun. I wasn't like in a mini skirt or what have you, or half naked, or nothing of that sort. So, and even if I had been half naked, he had no right to touch me in any inappropriate way. But I mean, on top of that, I really didn't put myself into a dangerous situation and took any risk whatsoever. And still I feel embarrassed. It doesn't make any sense. And I felt someone violated me, right? And I was embarrassed. And the monks were like, well, it's nothing. Who cares? Who cares, right? Like, doesn't, right? They were like, yeah, well, right? Like, well, if a woman had touched me, I wouldn't have minded. I mean, it's a little bit, I don't know. That wasn't their argument. Yeah. You see, Tibetans actually, I think, have a different reaction to, because it's like my whole cultural baggage, right? I once met a nun who had been raped when she came from Tibet, and she kept it secret because if you're a monk or nun, and this seems very cruel, but if you're a monk or nun and you have been raped and you have desire in that moment, physical desire, you're no longer a nun or monk for that matter. So monks being raped is a lot more dangerous because then it's much more likely that you have a physical reaction, just how the body works. So if it happens to a monk or nun that they do get raped in a particular way, you do everything you can not to have any physical, right? And sometimes it's just a reaction, you can't do anything about it. But I remember there was a nun in McLeod, she got raped in a fruit store. There was like a place where they sold fruits. It's no longer there, they tore it down. But she went in not the room where they sell the fruits, but there was like a storage room in the back that was windowless. She went in there, she was raped. But bless her heart, she spoke out. And she said, I was raped. She didn't keep it secret because people may have doubted her. She said, I did not have desire. I know for certain. And everyone accepted that. She said, no, I did not. I had no physical reaction to that. I'm still a nun. And that was fine. It was all accepted. So she didn't make a secret out of it. But the point is, people do sometimes, if they know themselves, they didn't have any desire, it didn't happen, but they don't want other people to, spread stories, they don't keep it private, but they don't end up with the same feeling of, I'm now contaminated, I'm this, I'm that. No, not like us in the West. Not like us in the West. In the West, we have a very different reaction. Like, I don't know about Indians, I have no idea, but there's a feeling of guilt. I think it comes from, in my case, I was raised in a Christian society where it was traditionally seen as the woman's fault if she got raped. It was kind of seen, everything that happened to her, even if men, kind of seen that way. And I guess that's part of our culture still. I'm not sure, I haven't really figured out why. So it's a different issue. And I had that very strongly. I felt guilty, I felt bad, and my classmates were like, that's his problem, it's not your problem. So what?
Saw that.
Pardon?
They saw what he did. They saw what the guy did. They saw what...
Yeah, they did. They saw it, and I also said, I told them, look, they just did it. I was like, I had to tell someone, so those who didn't see it, I said, they just touched me in a weird way down there. I said nothing else, right? And they were like, so? It's his problem. And I'm like, no, this is so terrible, this is so embarrassing. And they're like, well, you didn't do anything. So they didn't take it in any way. So I think it's got a lot to do with our own mind. And therefore, the point is thus, I felt violated, so that perception of myself, and it created pain in my mind that didn't have to be there. You see what I'm saying? So I think a lot of the times when people in the West get somehow this guilt and that kind of feeling of being violated, it's so painful, but I think it has to do with our thoughts, because if it happened to us when we were sleeping, for instance, like we were sleeping and we didn't even know about it, it didn't matter, right? So nothing happens to us. I mean, unless of course there's a STD or something, or worse, we get pregnant, for instance. I'm not talking about that, but just about, right? Actually, and of course, if there's some physical injury, that's again different. But in actuality, it has to do very much with our reaction. And I'm not blaming anyone, of course not. But I'm thinking, watching Tibetans having a different approach, so can we actually save ourselves from a lot of suffering, ourselves personally? And that doesn't mean the person doesn't need to be, of course, persecuted and so forth. But that terrible feeling we have. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm bringing this up. My apologies, I didn't want to get too much into this. But my point is just, we don't feel like we have to defend this I. We don't have to be always on the defense in terms of we have to be successful, we have to be popular, we have to be praised, and we always have to have pleasant experiences, we have to be seen in a particular way. It's all that pressure that society puts on us. I have a very good friend, and one time we were just goofing around. And you know, it's very important for nuns to be an example for others. It's seen as important, and that makes sense. It makes perfect sense that we should be examples for others. So there's a bit of pressure on us. But the moment the self is involved, it becomes very difficult. So the self is there. Unless you're really advanced, then the self is involved. So there are practitioners, they keep the Vinaya, they're good monks and nuns, but if people still talk about them, they couldn't care less, because they know they haven't done anything right. That's how it should be. But we said this, her and I, we were joking, goofing around about the fact that our reputation is so important to us, conjoined with the self. And we were going through this, we were saying, now, over so many years, our reputation is reasonable. We haven't done anything weird, but it took many years to get to there. So what would it take to destroy this? So we said, let's go to the temple when everyone is there, receiving the teaching, and put on a funny head, scream around, and take 1 quarter. Done. Right? We were just kind of imagining the funny things you could do. But what was really funny was the fact it takes so long to build a reputation, and it takes split seconds to destroy it. And just that fact, and how the self, the ego, when we're out among other people, right? We would never act the way we act normally, only because we feel we have to protect this I. Whereas in actuality, the reputation, so it's not a pure reputation like I want to make sure the Dharma is respected because I have a responsibility. That is a tiny part of it, but mainly it's the self. I want to be seen as a particular person. I want a certain standing and so forth. So our position in reality and in society. So how much time and energy is wasted on that? My position in a group, my this, my that, having to defend, having to gratify myself. This is why we're so busy and have no room and space in our mind, because in particular we perceive this particular I. And so I want to do a meditation on that. Tyler, you wanted to say something?
I think this is true for everyone in the world except Donald Trump, right? Because so this is true for everyone in the world except Donald Trump.
That's not true with Donald Trump. Because I'm pretty sure you can get the tariffs down if you compliment his hair. No, I'm kidding. Someone said this as a joke, you know. They said, if you want to reach something with Donald Trump, you know, don't be in any way resentful, just compliment him on something and you get whatever you want. I in a way, I believe that to be true. He's got such an ego that I'm pretty sure Putin knows, and he knows how to manipulate Trump.
Yeah. Well, what Trump said was really famous because he keeps doing all these outrageous things.
Yeah.
Any other person in the world, any other president, their reputation would be gone.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said in his first term, he's like, I could shoot someone on 5th Ave in New York and you guys would still elect me.
Yeah.
And it really is like, that's
true. Because he lies. He has, and I've once read this article about him that he was raised in that way by his father, and you know, but he was a ruthless businessman as well. So he came to that point. If you just say, no, that didn't happen, often enough, even people who saw you doing it will believe it at some point. And that's what he does. He just, you know, he is so over the top that it's beyond people's ordinary kind of conventional sense, that they actually think there must be something to it, because who would do this otherwise? So it's pretty crazy, but it's very interesting to learn about self-centeredness on his example, because what he has in an extreme form, we all do. We can also be manipulated. If people know our weakness, the greatest weakness, and they can play into that, they can manipulate us because of our self-centeredness. So Trump, it's so obvious that I've heard, actually, you can get whatever you want if you compliment certain things. And I'm looking forward to this, well, not looking forward, I'm dreading him and Putin getting together and Putin being clever. What is he going to do to get his way? Make Trump believe he's the great peacemaker and he's the greatest president? If he can suggest that in any way, Putin is going to get what he wants. And then the Zelensky has to be just as clever to get his way, and it's going to be a struggle. Yep, there's not much common sense there. But the point is, no. Oh, sorry, I wasn't going to go into that. But it's still, no, it was my fault. I went into that. But the thing is this. Let's now do a meditation on exactly that. How our sense, if we understand that the self doesn't exist in such a way, especially that solid I, that is more solid and that is so real at times, like there's a real person there, not just something inherent, but really something there. Understanding it is not there, then we're free. We don't have to care for its reputation. We don't have to obsess over it in the same way. Yeah. And that means a lot of freedom. Yes, Gal?
Just a small thing.
Please.
What you shared before about how did the person touch you?
Yeah.
So I think in this kind of cases, it's not about, it's because you are sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you should compare yourself to how Tibetan react or something like this. And I think part of it is also accept like that you are hurt, like by, I don't know if this is sense of I or it's just sensitivity, but firstly accept what happens, and then it's also have to release it.
That is true, Gal. When this happened to me, I didn't suppress it. I talked about it. I thought about it. And you're absolutely right. It's not about thinking, oh, that's just the self. I repress it. Bad idea. No. Sorry. Please don't get me wrong. I'm actually taking it to a level, pretending I'm understanding and kind of visualize what freedom that would be. But in the meantime, we need to accept that feeling of being violated and accept that as well, as part of us. But see also that this is to do with the self-centered mind, and that is not bad. It just is. Right now it is. And I deal with it for what it is. So please don't get me wrong. I don't want to say like, oh, these emotions that you have because of self-centeredness are wrong. They just are, because the cause is there. And let's deal with them and accept them and not push them away. But also visualize ourselves as in like, how would it be if there wasn't that shame, because there's no self that I have to defend? And just visualize that, right? And that already puts my mind in that direction. You see what I'm saying? But I said in the very beginning, do not wish it away. Imagine what it's like, and that's it. But deal with it as it's there, allow for it to be there, and get to know it and be accepting. Do you see how there's no contradiction? It's a bit like we have a disease right now. We know the cause. We can visualize what it's like to not have the cause, but we still deal with the cause in an appropriate way. So thinking what it's like not to have it moves us in that direction, but we are realistic, dealing with the, right? So now I was able to let go, but at the time I wasn't. And I didn't suppress it or anything. My classmates, I said, you just don't know what it's like, and just, push them aside and said, you have no idea, try to explain it. And some were like, okay, never mind. But I didn't care about their reaction. Mine was still, Yeah, so yeah, I want to find definitely a balance between suppressing it, which is terrible, but also not allowing for that to just fester and fester forever.
Yeah. But not creating a story about it, and then it's not go, it stay.
Pardon?
I mean, if you, you recognize it,
Yes.
and you release it,
Yes.
instead of creating a story that go with you all your life.
Exactly.
And create this sense of self more strong.
Yes, absolutely. As Gal is saying, she's saying, deal with it, don't repress it, but don't make up a new story that makes it even bigger. Yes, which is unnecessary pain. Yeah, absolutely, very good point. All right, let's do this. We've got about 20 minutes, and as always, we start with some breathing meditation, and then I'll say a few things about that, or we meditate on that. Now, once again, remember that moment as part of your meditation, coming to the conclusion that that self-sufficient I cannot exist. What does that mean on an emotional level? Well, it means we don't have to worry about that self-sufficient I the way we ordinarily do. We don't have to worry about it being successful. In the sense that if it's successful, it's good. If it's not successful, it's good. For our attachment to success is usually based on an exaggerated I. Such as that master, that self-sufficient I. it's also that self-sufficient I that or that misperception of such an I that wants us to be liked. That goes as far as that we are obsessed with our popularity. And that could even cause us to dislike ourselves when others do. Seeing ourselves as important in the sense that we have the potential to benefit so many living beings. Is essential as part of our practice. Therefore, our unrealistic unrealistic sense of a self-sufficient I can destroy our healthy self-confidence. It can prevent us from doing what's right. If it means it threatens our image. And it can cause us to fear criticism. In such a way that we constantly pretend to be someone else. To the extent that we're even in denial ourselves of negative qualities that are nothing to be ashamed of. And the recognition of which is crucial for our development. And again, our sense of a self-sufficient I and the need for that to be successful leads to envy and competitiveness. For I can no longer bear that someone else is possibly more successful than we are. We see ourselves as totally separate from others. And it seems their success and happiness harm my own success and my own happiness, leading to envy. And our perception of a self-sufficient I causes our obsession with pleasant experiences and the avoidance with unpleasant ones. It becomes so much harder to accept short-term problems or discomfort. For the sake of long-term well-being. For our sense of a self-sufficient I requires immediate gratification. And happily satisfies long-term happiness for short-term sense of satisfaction. And it leads to so much fear. Fear of unpleasant experiences, fear of failure, fear of being criticized or disliked by others. And fear of loss. Of losing what is mine, what belongs to the self-sufficient I. And loneliness. For I no longer see others as a part of me, but totally separate from them. If I don't get the approval of others, again, I feel low about myself and lonely. But all these unpleasant experiences only come from exaggerating the way the I exist, perceiving it so concrete, as so solid and concrete, that it appears like a master, a self-sufficient entity. While understanding that has never existed and will never exist. Will automatically eliminate all these different unpleasant emotions, robbing me of all my freedom. So now to conclude, whatever conclusion or insight you've come to, especially on an emotional level, spend a few moments just focusing on that, especially on the fact that our life would become much freer if we fully understand the non-existence of a self-sufficient I. Okay. All right. Enjoy dinner. And then for your discussion today, see whether you can discuss in particular how these ideas of the self and so forth, is it really beneficial in terms of our problems? Maybe you can share with others how, again, it comes down to how this becomes relevant, what we learn, but especially on an emotional level, without, as Gal says, without saying, I'm in denial of the way I feel. No, still be accepting, but at the same time also have the wish to really understand how the self exists, because I believe that that can solve my problems. You see, because the reason I'm saying this is, like, oftentimes people learn these ideas and the question always remains, how is this relevant? And it needs to be tailored to your personal psychological problems, and we can learn from each other how that is the case. So if it's anxiety, if it's loneliness, whatever bothers you the most, to find a way to make what you've learned helps you to deal with that and reduce it at least. So this is what I want you to exchange and learn from each other, because sometimes it may not be as obvious. You may feel like, well, my fear won't be reduced by thinking about that. And then someone else may say, well, in my case it does. Share it with that person, and then maybe that's helpful in that way. Because from a Buddhist point of view, any problem we have can be dealt with by that. But we need to find a way to step by step bring the two together, and that's what's difficult. Am I making sense? Okay, so that's what I want you to discuss tonight. Thank you, and have a good evening. Oh, no. I'm thinking dinner. All right. And so, once again, it's important that we dedicate so that whatever virtue we've accumulated is not destroyed by a moment of anger, or doesn't ripen into some insignificant, pleasant experience, but rather through the power of our mind is directed towards actualizing our fullest potential by thinking, may this become, however minor it may be, but become a major cause for us to be able to understand the different levels of selflessness, to utilize our understanding of selflessness
to overcome all our afflictions and the residues they leave on our mental continuum, like the smell of garlic, so that we can remove what is extra in our mind by way of attaining the awakened state of a Buddha, and be not just of the greatest benefit to ourselves, but to all and every living being. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayer, doing it once with bodhicitta and once with the mind realizing emptiness. So may the precious bodhicitta arise, if not yet born. When generated, may it never diminish, but increase more and more. May the precious realization of emptiness arise, if not yet born. When generated, may it never diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, thank you. And now enjoy it.